everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Coaching Call podcast. On this podcast, we'll cover various types of coaching by trainers in sports, martial arts, fitness, and business. We'll discuss each coach's methods to getting the most out of their respective athletes or clients and how they attempt to change the platform in which they coach. Join us on a fun adventure as we discuss unique coaching styles. Coaching is a universal part of how we get others to get something done. Join your host, Rafael, and his guests on this unique journey in coaching.
Hi, I'm Sifu Rafael, and this is the Coaching Call podcast. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. This episode was made possible by listeners like you. Susan, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me on Coaching Call. How are you this morning?
I'm terrific. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I'm excited for this conversation.
Oh, so am I. I get to know you more. This is beautiful. I love it. Susan, so the way I believe that we become who we are based on our childhood, the experiences we've had, the people who were in it, the influences that help shape us. So tell us, where were you born and who started influencing you before the age of 10? And then we'll go from there.
Sure. So I happened to be born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but I really grew up in Northern California in the San Jose area. We lived very, very briefly in Wisconsin. And the key influences before the age of 10 was all family, quite honestly. I was born with a heart defect, and I had open heart surgery when I was 4 and spent a tremendous amount of time during my recovery. This was a lot of years ago with my mom, right? And when I was born, my parents' father was in school in Milwaukee, and they were isolated. So I was although I ended up having a younger sibling, I spent a lot of time sort of just me and my mom until I was fully recovered. So, then it was school, but very involved with grandparents and aunts and uncles. So it was very family focused early childhood for sure.
Wow. Open heart surgery at 4.
Yeah.
That's an incredible, you probably, how can I put it? Had no idea what on earth was going on and why is this happening?
You're
I'm
right.
wondering if that happened.
I do have, it's interesting when people talk about childhood memories. My clearest childhood memories start in that period. I had the surgery really a week after I turned 4. My grandmother, who was a 3rd grade elementary school teacher, had her class throw a birthday party for me. She had them make all the artwork. I am not even sure how you would pull that off, but
she did it.
She did it, right? It was terrific. So I sort of remember this very different birthday party, big deal, and then have clear memories of being in the hospital. The surgery was performed at University of California, San Francisco. So I was at a big research medical center because this was a lot of years ago. And once again, it was a heart defect, so it just wasn't as common. And yeah, the memories from that time, I didn't know what was going on, but the way hospitals were set up then, right now fortunately, there's a lot more privacy. Back then, there was sort of like a children's ward, if you will, with beds. And because of the nature of my surgery, I was in there with very, very ill children, most of whom were undergoing cancer treatments or other treatments. And so it just even processing the other children I was with and what was happening. That period is definitely a time of reflection for me and memories.
Wow. How long do you remember being in the hospital?
That's where it is a bit of a blur. I remember sort of waking up, and at some point, so let's be clear, when I say I remember waking up, who knows, after the surgery, and the stitches, sutures, looking to me like spiders, right? Because they're black on your
Right, right,
right.
right.
Who knows if that was a few hours or a few days after, right? So the
Right, right,
actual
right.
amount of time is a blur. I remember being there. I remember the day I left. I remember like light and happiness. I remember outfits that I thought my mom wore that maybe she did, maybe she didn't. So it's
Right,
like
right, right, right.
sort of this interesting collage, if you will.
Mhm.
And I was very fortunate in that most of my memories are not actually frightening. I must have felt safe, and I did feel safe and protected during that time. I remember being uncertain, but I also the memories, because they can cut a lot of different ways, for me, were about feeling safe and protected in a very uncertain environment. And in that way, I was very, very fortunate.
I love how you said you remember the day you were leaving and you felt joy.
Oh, yes.
Tell me about that.
So I think anyone who worked with childhood memories, it's interesting because what's real, what's not. I seem to have this memory of a, I felt pretty certain there were all these little gates in our ward, like low gates, but
Right.
once we were ambulatory, and I remember sort of walking toward or reeling toward and seeing my mom come up on the other side of the gate. Now, the memory expands to like a shaft of light coming in, her like almost running toward me. And this is where the joy I felt, I think has made it a bit cinematic in my
Right. That's all.
memory, almost like the romantic movies, but this is a mom coming to, take me out of the hospital being healed. And so it's fun as an adult, all
Mhm.
these years, 50 plus years later to think about that. And having been in hospitals and adults, like there probably wasn't some huge window with a huge shaft of
No.
light. San Francisco in general, not always super sunny, even.
Right.
So,
Wow. What an experience. And moving on, right? At 4, I'm sure you were limited in the beginning of the activities that you could do. When were you allowed to start just being a little girl, running around, climbing, and doing all the crazy things that little girls do?
I think my next sort of set of memories of not feeling at all restricted were probably around 5, like kindergarten. I don't
Mhm.
feel, sort of remember kindergarten and don't remember any real association. So I think the great thing about it is that period of sort of convalescence,
Mm.
there isn't as much memory of being sort of held back. And that was one of the reasons I think for the surgery at that age was to, right, sort of shoot me into, if you will, a world of normal activities. Like I said, now that sort of thing, I won't say it would have been outpatient, but very different.
Right, right.
Technology is just, and particularly in the space of the heart, has changed so much.
It sure has. I mean, thank God for those doctors that were able to have that,
Yeah,
um,
no, everything
procedure done
about
on you.
where we were living at the time and the situation was very, very fortunate.
Nice, nice. And the fact that you felt so safe with your mom, that's beautiful. Talk to me about later on in life, even in your teenage years, besides your mom, who would you say were influential people that,
Sure.
you recall?
So by the time I was a teenager, right, it had really shifted to what I would say were friends and people I saw, teachers, people in media, right? I started to,
Mm.
as I think all teenagers are, be really impacted by popular culture, by TV, what you were seeing. This will date me, but Partridge Family was hugely
Oh, I
popular.
remember
I
them.
think I wanted to be Lori Partridge for a really, really long time, right? So, you think of your teenage thoughts and and dreams, and MTV was starting at that time, and of course, you just like want to be on MTV, and I didn't pursue that.
Right.
So it's funny to think of some of those things, but the catalyst during that point, and sort of where I got my first career from, because in many cases we go through a number of careers, is about sixth grade. I won an essay contest, a countywide essay contest. You got like at the time, a $200 savings bond. It was a thing,
Nice.
and picture in the paper. And as adults do, they're like, you should be a writer, right? And you're like, okay, I'll be a writer. I mean, really, that's sort of how it is for little kids. You get rewarded in some way, or you show some aptitude, and it's a natural, right? It's both helpful and it's sort of funny how that happens. And I was going down that path of, well, maybe I want to be a writer. But as a little kid, you don't know what you would write about, or even as a teenager, right? I didn't see being a novelist. And about that time, Nightline became a show, and I remember watching it because it was during the Iranian hostage crisis. I thought, I want to be a journalist. I want to be on TV. I want to share news. And that really sent me. So when you say, what was the big influence in that teenage years, it was probably seeing Nightline at the time, and then realizing I wanted to work in TV news. That's how I was going to apply writing initially.
Love it. Love it. Did you, let's talk about the initial wanting. How did you make it happen?
Sure. The initial wanting, I had sort of always planned, and in my family's culture, that I would go to college. So the initial wanting was going places where there might be a program, either in writing or journalism, or where I could get internships, and understanding that. And that sort of drove me through college, and then even to graduate school. And so it was, at that point, I was using education. A lot of people actually in TV at the time, and even now, don't need those degrees. It's one of those professions that I think if you can do it, you don't need degrees. For me, that was the path in, and the path that gave me, if you will, the most security, and that worked with the way I approach things.
And in college, what kind of courses did you realize you needed to take in order for that to come through?
So one of the things, because at the time I started to read about people in news, and how their careers started, and everything I read initially was, don't take journalism courses, take courses about everything, because you need to know a little bit about everything. So I went for a really broad education, a lot of, if you will, social science. I took some of everything. I took, if you look at it, it was like 2 courses, expert in none, dabbler, right? Just enough to sort of be dangerous everywhere. And then it wasn't until graduate school that I really started to hone in on, if you will, the writing, and particularly the TV aspects.
What was your first break in that?
So my first break, the funny thing back in the day, wanting to start off in TV news, and this is true, there's different size markets, is we made a tape, you drive around the country, and you'd go to all these little markets. And I started in a place called La Crosse, Wisconsin, and then went to Eau Claire. And so I drove right after graduate school across the country twice. And the first couple of job offers I got, industries really can shift very fast on people. And what holds true one moment, my teachers at the time, because remember this was TV, said what you want to do is you want to get a job at a station where you don't have to be your own videographer, right? Because the cameras were big and bulky, right? It's nothing like now, right? Where it's very easy to be your own videographer and to edit. But back then, so my first couple job offers, there was one in Iowa and one in South Carolina. I would have had to shoot my stuff, and my teachers advised me. They said, turn those down. So I turned down two. So famous things. I turned down two job offers when I really needed to start working in hopes of getting this. And then I went 8 months without
Ooh.
my next offer. And that's how I ended up driving across the country. And this is using an atlas, no cell phone,
No GPS.
small town, Wichita Falls, Texas, different Abilene, Texas, a lot of small markets, but I drove all through the Terre Haute, Indiana. I mean, I am amazing. If you ask where some really small cities are or towns, I'm like,
You know
I've been
them.
there. I know in Wheeling, West Virginia, where the TV station is. I love it. It ended up being such a great experience because it went to tenacity, perseverance, early decision making. Once again, my life's turned out the way it's turned out, so I can't really say it was a mistake turning down those original jobs. But that 8-month period, I ended up working as a temp because I had to at some point move home. During the Christmas season, I demonstrated silver polish in a mall because, right, you need to make money. And I remember the company was like trying to hire me full time. They're like, "You have a master's degree?" They really appreciate the fact I could stand there and demonstrate silver polish and then try and send, it was so funny. But those are the experiences that are great, where you realize you're at a point, you need to make money. You need to get off this path. And then once I made enough money to start staying with different friends that I had made in different places. Fortunately, I had friends, different places around the country. One of my closest friends from graduate school was working in Champaign-Urbana, which is in Illinois. So I got to stay with her when I drove the upper Midwest. And that's how I ended up with the first job in La Crosse, Wisconsin, which was actually a terrific job.
Tell us about landing it, and what was the job? What did it entail for you?
So it was pretty much what you think of local news. A friend of mine from graduate school was working there, and I drove up, met the news director. They had an opening. So originally I got hired as a reporter. Things moved very quickly. I then ended up being like the morning anchor and producer and reporter. I got moved to a sister station as the main anchor, right? In these small markets, you are just rewarded for showing up and working really hard. And because people are moving, you move pretty quickly through different scenarios. So yeah, I would go out and, it was very obviously cold, and I learned a lot about ice fishing, and there was a bald eagle repopulation. And so no, it was a really, all the 11 plus years I spent in journalism in different stations and evolving my career was terrific because of the perseverance, the every day you're just live. I mean, you get this, you've got a live window, and you're just going to work. You're going to do the best you can to put the best product out at that moment. And that really later, after I started a family and my husband and I chose to get out of the profession when I joined a company, really served very well. That it just ability to understand you need to work with what's here and produce something.
Being that you were in areas of small markets, as you say, were you recognized in public and they're like, "We know you"?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You'd be at the grocery store, or I mean, really anywhere, because these are small towns. And back in the day, there were 3 TV stations. There was, at best, there was an ABC one, there was a CBS one, there was an NBC, period. Right? This is pre-CNN, pre-Fox, pre-all of that.
Pre-cable.
Pre-cable. No, I mean, it really was. People had rabbit ears in many cases. And so you would end up doing things in the community. You really became part of that community, which was terrific. If there was a Christmas parade, you would host the Christmas parade, right? I mean, it was what was so great at the time, and this actually still goes on, but is how you could be very quickly embraced by a community if you were curious and wanted to understand the culture of the
Mm.
community.
Yeah, yeah. When you decided to leave that field, did you stay in that community that you were last in, or did you totally move away?
Yeah. So when I ended up leaving, I had met my husband. So several markets later, I'm working in a medium-sized market. I'm a main anchor and a producer. And when my husband and I had our child, there had been many year, but fertility struggle. We knew he'd probably be the only child. It dawned on me, or it didn't dawn on me, but I think anyone who's become a parent of your listeners, you think it's going to be one way. Like,
Mm.
oh, this is how it's going to work. And I'm going to anchor the 11 o'clock news, come home. This is how our life's going to be. And very shortly, I recognized that this career I loved just didn't fit anymore, right? It didn't fit like in an instant, but I didn't know that until baby was actually here. And so that was the big switch. And we really wanted at the time to move back closer to my family. So as I talked about the way I was brought up, knowing he would most likely be an only child because of the fertility struggle with
Mm.
cousins, near grandparents, etc.
Right.
So that major pivot is actually part of where my coaching now in major transitions, both career transitions, life transitions, there are just moments when we recognize, sometimes it's as clear as one day it fit, one day it didn't.
Right.
Other times it's a slow build
Mhm.
when we need to make changes in our lives. And there's a huge amount of uncertainty. Of course, there is. There's an ending, right? I love this profession. I had wanted to be in this profession since I was a teenager, or since winning in sixth grade. This essay contest, all my education had in essence been
Mhm.
aligned. I had worked 11 years. I'd moved through a series of markets. I'd had,
Right.
whatever success in whatever size pond. And then I needed to start anew,
Mm.
geographically, career-wise. So it was, I think we all face similar things, right? It's
Right.
the human story is the same. The circumstances are different. But it's funny now with the life transition coaching and career coaching I do, it's funny to think of that moment for many years. I ended up working in different aspects of a large global company, but mainly in human resources. And I ran recruiting functions and did a huge amount of coaching. And we
Mm.
always joked when interviewing and hiring, a person may have all the skills, but what is their motivation for doing the job? And I always would share the story. It's like I had all the skills to keep working in television news, to run newsrooms, to produce, I could have done different shifts. The motivation had
Mm.
disappeared for what was a
Right.
24/7, and by then cable had come and it was becoming even more 24/7. I mean, it was becoming what you see today, which is
Right.
you're always on call and it's always happening. And that, if you want to be a certain kind of parent, right? And we've talked about how I was raised in those first years, doesn't really go. It wasn't that I wasn't going to work because I always worked. It was the, if you will, the hours and the environment.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. When did you, and thank you for sharing that. What a incredible life decision, if you will, that you made for your child, boy or girl?
Son, boy.
Okay, son. And how important that had to be in his upbringing,
Yeah,
because you looked at the value of his life if you stayed doing what you were doing,
right.
compared to we need to shift. We need to make it so it's about us, not just about me, right?
Yeah.
And I love that, and this is a something that all parents should consider, that we have children for a purpose. Yes.
Yeah. That moment, and I want to really credit my husband here because this will go into being a couple. The alignment of values. I don't think either he or I prior, because he also had a career that shifted dramatically,
Mm.
understood the impact, but we knew our values were aligned, which then in that moment, because we both experienced we wanted something different that wasn't about us, because it shifted both of our careers, quite honestly, and it took a while. That understanding the underlying value, and all my coaching and work couldn't be more critical, because you don't know how the value is going to show up throughout your life, right? It's very hard to predict at 20 how a certain value is going to keep showing up, because you don't know what circumstances, but that awareness, if you will, of the value, or becoming, if you will, your North Star. That's not necessarily, I'm going to be an anchor person, I'm going to be a star on TV. That's not a value. That's like a goal, right?
Right.
The value was about service and communication. Quite honestly, it was, when I saw it, I was like, this is valuable information that is helpful, right? But it's very easy to think and get caught up, particularly as a young person. That's about me. It's about how I look. I want to be the next, whoever on the news. And that gets really twisted in our lives and in our culture and in our society. And it's really important at those pivotal moments that we find a way to unhook all of that and understand what the base value is about, and how you give that base value going forward, or live the base value.
I love that. When we think about the base value, you were working for a company and you were coaching, right? People coming in. When did you realize that you needed to do this as your own entity?
Yeah.
How long after helping others, working for someone else? I like to call it building somebody else's empire and not taking care of yours.
Yeah. I worked for this other company for 20 plus years, and it really aligned with things we wanted for our life, right? And I think that's really important when you look at careers you were doing for a company. It still is it was a family-owned company that valued relationships. I had lots and lots of growth opportunities. And because it was family-owned, there was always a deep, I would say, understanding of when family issues came up. So it was very helpful. We lived internationally, so I had a tremendous amount of opportunity. What happened to me, and it's where I ended up incorporating or discovering art journaling, that really took me on this different path, fully into life transition coaching, because I was very comfortable. I was working in HR and ran a very large organization. I was an executive, and that was using a whole series of skills that I used when I was a news director and produced the news. And it was satisfying. I felt like I was helping.
Right.
It sort of stops working. Once again, the pandemic ended up being such a clarifying point for so many of us, right? That was the birth of the child, but there are just moments when something happens that I knew I'd planned on working a number of more years, right? We get like a financial plan, you get an image.
Right.
And as the pandemic happened and the job in my field got so difficult, and I had a lot of caregiving and older, more vulnerable people in my life, and really struggled a lot with anxiety, it clarified I wanted to take a different path. I wanted to take a path that, as you said, that was more mine and my creation. I was willing to move out in the world, if you will, more vulnerably, more full-heartedly. Ironically, I think when we reflect our lives, we see, if you will, cycles. I call them spiral staircases, right? It's not an unusual phrase to say wholehearted. And yet with a person born with a heart defect who had heart surgery, right, there could be a lot of, if you will, protection. I'm going to do everything right, or perfectionism. And it's like, oh, I'm now ready through the tools and where I am to move out in a different way. And that aha came really in the first few months of the pandemic. Now, I didn't resign. I gave lots of notice because of the scope of my job and what I was doing in the time. It was 2 more years. It wasn't till 2020 that I really went out on my 2022, rather, sorry, on my own. But there was that moment of clarity once again, that this is a major life switch. I don't know what it's going to look like on the other end, but I know this life that I've worked at decades and planned on staying longer just doesn't fit anymore.
Uh, you it's very interesting how life coaches us along the way.
Absolutely.
Right? All the tools that you gathered or you gained along the way, all the people you probably met along the way, especially as a reporter, helping produce shows and so forth, and then helping this company. And I love the fact that you talked about that were family based, so they understood family dynamics, and that sometimes we may need to take a day off to handle family issues. And I love companies like that, by the way. But it would still, you were helping build their empire. And then you said, wait a minute, it's my time, right? Because I believe we are all here to build our own empire. And what that looks like is different for every individual.
Yeah.
And the fact that it took 2 years and you gave them plenty of time, that was beautiful on your part, right? I'm sure they appreciated it as well. And you said you didn't know what it was going to be like, what you were going to get into. What drove you to become the kind of coach you are?
Wow. If you think of it, and I love the way you just sort of described that life journey, because everything we have talked about is what has driven me, right? The willingness to take big chances, what perseverance looks like, what not take, how to manage rejection or being bullied, all of those things have, and then the fortunateness of some really great training and certifications, because there are tools we can use to help clarify and really break down. So many times people feel stuck because of a success script that they got from family, from culture, about what this should look like, right? And what my life should, air quotes, be like, when I should get a bigger house, a better car, right? Whatever the material thing. And it's so important. And I spoke about values a few minutes ago as a coach. I was doing this in corporations and did a lot of work with the company on values clarification, on strategic direction, to know not only where your values are, but where your North Star is, what your higher purpose is, what the legacy, if you will, when you die is. What is it? Everyone jokes that it's never going to be about drove the nicest car. Now,
Right.
Someone may want, and I heard a great story, they may want that boat, but why want the boat? Because many cases, as you do that, there was a memory of being with my grandfather on a boat, or friends. It ties for most humans in some form to connection, to safety, to love, to freedom, right? There's any number of those words, but as you really dig and work with a client through tools, it's so satisfying to see them recognize, if you will, their North Star, clarify their purpose, what their values actually look like in their life. Because one person's, I want to be careful here because I know this can be a bit confusing. One person's definition of respect might be very different. It may be, because I respect you, I am going to speak up and tell you something. Another person's definition of respect may be, I'm going to allow you to do what you are doing. And I think it's really important as coaches, or in my practice, that we get really clear on not just saying, and I use respect, but it could be integrity, it could be loyalty, how that shows up and what it looks like, because that helps you be very intentional, and that can drive a lot of then your actions and get you out of reactivity. So everything in my life, quite, it's sort of funny to say everything, but when you do that work and dig really deep, it gives you, it unfolds like a map, if you will. It doesn't tell you exactly where you're going, but it helps you stay pointed. And I think working with coaches is so important because it's very easy to get hooked. I use that word, or snagged on what we should be doing. Like anyone of a certain age, if someone thinks of retirement, they may think of a number or a lifestyle, but not connection. What are their days going to feel like? Where's their sense of purpose going to come from? Right?
I love that. And one of the things that you made me think about is that I personally don't want to own a boat
Yeah. Yes.
because there's so much work that goes into owning a boat that I think my time would be more valuable in other areas. The enjoyment of being on the water is great, and I do love that. But because I have friends and I've seen it, people where they own small boats, and I have friends who own yachts.
Yeah.
And anytime they come back from the water, it takes hours to clean that boat off.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, either I have to hire a crew, which some of my friends do. They hire a crew, they come back, they make a phone call, the crew comes in, 4 or 5 people come in, they clean that boat. And that's another thing I have to think about or worry about. And it doesn't serve the purpose of my life, right? There's other things that I can be invested in that are going to serve the purpose of what you were talking about. Because life is so precious that we need to understand where we put our time.
Absolutely.
How important is every minute of our lives? If we waste it, we will never get it back. Money will always come back. The more you put out, the more you get back. That's my feeling. But I love the idea of the value principle that you've been talking to us about throughout this whole show. The value principle that we put on us, how critical we have to harness that, to hold on to it. Because if we don't do it, somebody else is going to do it for us and we're going to be lost. So I love how you have transformed your life. If you think about the transitions, right? And you talk about the joy, especially at 4 years old, and the creativity that allowed you to have the life that you're now enjoying. What was your first client like? Because sometimes we take that first client, even though we don't want them, because we just need a client, right? Was it that situation? Pardon my camera, and my camera does do that every so often.
It's okay. Hello.
And yeah, it's if I do this, it goes zooms in. If I
Yeah.
then I have to do that, and it zooms back out. It's kind of a
It's
crazy
magic.
little
I
fun
actually
thing.
quite love that.
Yeah. So I got to be careful how I point, right?
Yeah.
But when we are living the life that we really, really need to live for us, to create our empire. And I'm not talking about that you can't work for somebody else to create your empire, because your empire is you and your family, right? Those closest to you. I think that's what makes the empire. So when you have created this life that you are in at the moment, that first client could have been a pivotal point where you said, oh my God, did I make a mistake? I don't want to do this. Or was it where you guided them and it was just so amazing that you said, I need to help others? Tell us about your first client.
Well, it's interesting because sometimes both are true. In my navigating transitions clients, I've been very fortunate aligned, because one thing that will come up in original calls or initial calls is that ability to see if my goal is to serve and add value. And if the tools I use resonate, right? Because someone in just the initial conversation before they are paying is saying no, or all the reasons why something isn't working, I know won't get value out of working with me. And I'm fortunate that the dollar or the paycheck in that sense doesn't matter. But where I had a lot of experience initially needing to work was in my role within the company, because I would be assigned, if you will, to coach or to nurture. In many cases, it meant a person was having a challenge. And so having worked through what that looks like and understanding that coaching only works if the person engaging wants to reflect. About a year ago, I was hired for a broader job, and there were a few people. It was, if you will, some teamwork. And one of the members in the dialogues and in the tools, there was just always a reason why, always if you will, an excuse, which I could accept and make suggestions. But I finished that. And I remember that feeling that you get sometimes of deflation, of recognizing. And what I told myself was, you don't know when some seeds have been planted, when something else occurs. So I do try and view it as planting seeds or an offering. And I am pretty careful on the one-on-one clients, because time is precious, right? That is our wealth. And I'm at a life stage where my time, I know it is best spent in many ways with people who are curious, right? It doesn't mean we're always going to agree, but they're willing to be curious. Now, in workshops that I have led, that is always an interesting thing. And I do that with some of the art journaling, because you may have 5 participants or 10 who are just totally getting it. And if you're doing a debrief of how did that make you feel, what feelings came up, and you're talking, they're sharing and can really understand it. And then you sometimes can have a few others, and you can just, once again, tell that they're a bit trapped. They were asked to come or something. So, the long answer is, now I really try and I think it's important, because it's clients' money, make sure we're a good fit and that we're wanting the same thing. In the past, when I've had that, I try and view it as planting seeds and trying to meet them where they are, which really can be. Is there anything you see here? I mean, sometimes with some of the people who may be most stuck and see, it may be, is there anything that you see that you think you could impact, right? If they're very out of what's their circle of influence. And sometimes you meet people, I talk about like what's in your control and what isn't. We'll spend our time working on that, like trying to just understand what is in their influence, what's theirs and what's not theirs.
Yeah, that's powerful. Understanding if they're coachable is so important.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure you and I have had people that we do a one-on-one with, and all they do is complain about how they never got the services that they needed, and they went from this coach to that coach to this coach to that coach, and nobody can help them. And so they're looking at you for answers that they don't want anyway,
Right?
Because they're going to make you another person who didn't help them. How is it that you decide that the person is a right fit for you?
I try and spend in that initial conversation a lot of time getting to the why, that's like 5 whys deep. I don't know if anyone your audience, my company, we rolled out Lean Six Sigma, and I'm a Six Sigma certified person. But one of the easiest tools is sort of the 5 whys, and in a non-accusatory way, really trying to say, why are you here? and that what do you want out of it? But it's not just going with the first, why are you here? It's like, why, I want to get along better with someone. Why? Right? Because they frustrate me. I'm angry, why? So then it's like, do they want to feel different? Are they going to want tools to manage their emotions? Or are they going to, right? And so you keep going down the whys to understand, in many cases, what's really underneath it. And that's where you can start to, even in that first conversation, dig at values. And are they open to that discussion? Right.
Right. Yeah. I love that because it's almost like a revelation for them
Yeah.
to understand that now I understand why I need you as my coach. I love that.
Well, right. And the other thing in that why, if a person becomes really, really frustrated during the exercise, which it can be, and says, I want you to tell me, there can be something very interesting because in I think really effective coaches with really effective tools, the work is all coming from the person being coached. You're providing tools, but their willingness to not have a magic wand or to not have it be you, it can be very telling by about that fifth why. And are they getting curious and more curious about what's in them, or are they just ready to kill you?
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, that makes so much sense. When you take on a client, what would you like to expect from, let's call it the perfect client, right? Which I've never met one yet, because if they were perfect, they wouldn't need me, right? But when we talk about a perfect client, somebody who's coachable, somebody who's going to do the work that you ask them to do, somebody who shows up on the calls, somebody who's always present when you're there, maybe they're taking notes, they're doing what you're asking of them. What does that look like for you when you meet somebody who is like that?
Wow. I mean, you've actually just made me think of two clients particularly. I've been really fortunate.
Nice.
What sticks out is the curiosity and the enthusiasm and the commitment. These are busy people. I tend to coach people with, full-time jobs are busy, and they show up. Or if we do have to reschedule, they see it coming and they understand. If I give them a tool, it's just really great tool. It's sort of a wisdom journal for the week. All of a sudden they're using it and they're giving feedback and they're excited. So for me, the very best clients are those that continue to be curious, even when they get frustrated or even when they've had a really difficult week working on what they want to work on or what they want to see, even when it feels like 2 steps back or 3, they come back with a curiosity. And it's sort of an overused word, but boy, I think for ourselves as coaches, it's really important sometimes to ask myself, why am I getting hooked? Right? Right? I mean, it sort of goes both ways, but in clients, these two I'm thinking of, it was their showing up with that sense of curiosity. Maybe there's a period of venting. We all need to vent. Maybe there's a period of frustration, sadness. That is never a problem. But then getting under it, it's how can I, them in this case, be better, right? It's going back to their circle of influence and that curiosity to sometimes we talk about reframing certain scenarios and the stories. I work a lot with the stories they're telling themselves. And is it true, right? Is what this person did that was, appeared deceitful and blah, blah, blah. Is that absolutely true? Do you know for a fact? Could there be any other? And it's not about changing what happened. It's about understanding the different series of different perspectives and how much they may not know about what's actually going on. And it's exploring that. That can release so much anxiety of just testing yourself on, is this absolutely true?
Mm.
What has happened in the story you have told yourself? Is this person, do you know for a fact this person is whatever, making you look bad, throwing you under the bus, right? And then what are your options? But we need to spend a little time looking at some of those stories, and those that are curious and those that are willing to entertain, could something else be true? What is their part in it? I are just, for me, the ideal clients when they get curious. And once again, I've actually two recent ones in the past year have been like that. It's been such a pleasure.
Oh my God, those are like the best clients.
They are. You're making me realize how so grateful I am for them, how
Yeah.
fortunate I am.
Mhm. It is incredible when we do have clients, and I have several I can think of myself, who are helping us to continue what we're doing because they value us. They value the time they spend with us. And money is not an option, but it's the quality of their time that we
Yes,
value. And all of a sudden, it's like I'm looking forward to working with this client, right?
absolutely.
Because it's such a rewarding exchange.
Yeah,
Even though I'm helping them, they're helping me to become better, to be
absolutely.
worthy more. And I love that the fact that you have these two clients in mind. But I am going to wish upon you many clients like that.
Thank you. I wish that upon me and everyone listening, because I think when we're working in that, that's like that synergy where we're both
Mhm.
growing and getting better, right? If I have a value of connection, what I get from those clients is that sense of we are in this helping each other achieve something that individually we're not going to get to. So, that I wish for everyone listening who does coaching or really doing anything. It is, if you're running your own business and you have clients or even a business to business, it's so deeply satisfying to work in a way that is additive versus combative.
Right, right. I had a client, just thought I'd share this with you, who I wasn't sure if I should even take him on,
Mm.
but I gave him a fair shake. And in the process, he had so much ego
Mm.
that I wasn't sure. And then he said, I'm going to stop for a little while. I said, great. I was happy. I was happy. But then when he actually came back,
Hmm.
he realized the value I was giving him. And he actually put his ego aside. And I've been able to do incredible work with this person. And not only has he turned the relationship around for both of us, right? Because now I look forward to the time I spend with him. But he's also brought me other quality clients, which is an incredible. Now, this is a person that when he said to me, I need to take a little time off, I was happy, right?
Yeah.
And if he never came back, I would have been okay.
Yeah.
But he came back a different person, and it was such a beautiful thing to see that had I not given him a little bit of a fair shake, if you will, that would never have come through for me and for him,
Yeah.
right? And I think the time away is what allowed him to reflect like, whoa, Rafael is somebody I need to have as a coach, have somebody that instills value in me. So that was a beautiful thing, and every time now I work with him, I am thrilled.
Yeah.
and he tells me, "Oh, I'm bringing this person." I'm like, "Really? Thank you." And I'm so grateful to him. But there have been a lot of clients who, similarly, once they understand the value that we bring, they will refer other people
Yeah.
because we are giving them. For me personally, I give them more than they ever expected,
Yeah.
and I can tell you do the same, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for sharing that story, because that's the seeds that get planted that sometimes you wonder. And I love it because it's always so satisfying to see growth in any client. And yes, that's such a particularly great story because of the growth you saw. That's wonderful.
Yeah. So, Susan, I've had such a great time
Oh, me
spending with you. Thank you for allowing us to know some of your story. I'm sure there's so many different stories that you can bring across. Thank you for today. What an incredible human being you are. I'm so happy we connected. I'd love to give you 30, 45 seconds. Your website is going across the bottom, right? Is your name susanhensley.com,
yeah.
hensley.com. Tell us what somebody can expect when they do come to your website.
Sure. So if you go to my website, we've been focusing on my coaching practice. And if you're curious about that, that's just the contact me button, and I'll get an email and then work with you. But one of the tools I use in coaching is art journaling. I've written a book on that. You can find out about that. There's a free downloadable PDF on how to get started and use it in times of chaos. There's online training, videos. There's a few different things, but mainly for our conversation, for anyone interested in coaching, it's just the contact button. But yeah, you get a fuller picture for sure. But I want to thank you. This has been terrific. We've had a initial conversation where we got to know each other, and I am so impressed by the breadth that you are bringing your audience on so
Thank
many
you.
fronts in your level of interest. But I could see as a coaching, it's really, I use the word a lot, like generative. It's about growth. I think we're here to grow and evolve. And it's been such a pleasure getting to know you. So thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, what a pleasure in having you.
Yeah.
And do me a favor, come on my other shows too. I think you're such a fresh breath of air and enthusiasm and
Yeah. No, I would
how
love
can I say
to.
this? You are so impactful. So
Oh,
thank you.
thank you. Oh, well, thank you. You too. It has been terrific. Thank you.
Have an amazing rest of your day. Everybody, do me a favor. Share the show. Such great insights. And follow Susan. Go to her website. Take care, everybody. I'm going to try to end the stream now. Goodbye, everybody.